Jack Nolan is a singer-songwriter from Sydney who has released 6 solo albums and 1 with the Kelly Gang in 2004. His latest album is the very rich, layered, deserves repeated listening songs for Hemingway, and I'm going to ask him about that. Hello, Jack.
Hi, Sophie. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you to talk about this album. And I have listened to some of your earlier music as well, although admittedly was concentrating on songs for Hemingway. And I'm going to start by asking about the man himself. Have you been a long-time fan of Ernest Hemingway?
Look, I'm traditionally not a great reader. I don't know if it's the ADD thing, but I do read. Not a long-term fan. I read The Old Man and the Sea, which is more or less a novelette, and loved it. And I love the theme of that record, which is more or less, I don't know if you know it, not the record, the novel, sorry. I don't know
I've
if you
read
know
it, yes.
Yeah. And it was sort of more or less, that's not such a big deal. I just went out too far. I took too much on, and I kind of really related to that, And so I read it when I was in Canada, and I don't know, it just had a profound effect on me. And there's a song on the record called Tofino, and I borrowed that idea of being too far out and too far gone. And so I thought in honor of borrowing that sort of idea, I'd name the record after him.
Well, there you go. I have read Old Man and the Sea, but because I have been a long-time fan of Ernest Hemingway, but the first book I read was A Farewell to Arms.
Yeah.
So I felt that The Old Man and the Sea was not quite as colourful as A Farewell to Arms. So that's actually when he lost me, The Old Man and the Sea.
Oh, is that right? Well, that's where he won me.
Yeah. So
There's
I was like, nothing's happening.
Ken Burns did a great documentary on him.
Yeah, look, he was a singular character in literature, and so I can totally understand why you'd want to name an album after him. And you mentioned Vancouver and Vancouver Island and Tofino, and I did actually have a question about that because I recognize that place name from there. So there you go. You've answered that question already. And actually, the question I was going to ask you about Tofino was if you went there to write songs specifically.
Well, I always have a guitar, and I think the answer to that question is not specifically, but I'm always writing.
Okay.
So in one form or another, whether it's playing and recording voice memo ideas or writing down, so not specifically, but always writing.
Because I know you started writing this album after you released Jindabyne in 2022, which was your previous album. So. Or maybe you didn't start writing then, maybe you were always writing, but I'm wondering if you felt there was that juncture of, okay, I've released Jindabyne, now I'm going to move on to new songs, or if actually that was just a continuous flow.
A good question. I'm sort of, I'd finished Jindabyne and knew I was going to do another record. I'm sort of at a point in my life now where I've got free air. I don't have any dependence. And it's my one passion. So I'm always writing, but I thought once Jindabyne was out, and as you speak to a lot of independent artists, and I'm sure you know, there's so much involved in doing it all yourself. From the recording, if it was just about the recording, that'd be great. But all the work that goes into getting it out, organising the shows, the clips, releasing it on all the platforms, there's so much work involved. So once that's done and the album's released, I'm always looking for the next project and writing up ideas from that point once it's out. So, it was always going to happen. And I'm sort of hoping to, release a record every 12 months, ideally.
Right. Well, that is a cracking pace. But if you are always writing, then no doubt you always have material. Is it then a question of how you select which songs you have to put on the album?
Oh, definitely. Like I talk about this a bit. My process is, I use the guitar almost as just a friend that's with me when I'm watching television or sport. And if I'm hearing, I'll fiddle around with it. And if I hear, sometimes when you're doing other things, you'll almost hear what you're playing as a third party. And if I like the sound of that, I'll record that with a melody over the top of it. Sometimes mumbling, sometimes with words that make no sense, and then leave it and never ever listen to it again that day, regardless of how excited I might be about what I think I've just recorded. and then I come back to it. I've literally got hundreds of those on my phone. That's basically my initial recording studio, and then I sift through those, and it's a culling process. And if I hear something that I like, I then make a decision whether it's worth really getting into it and creating a song from there. And that's a pretty big decision, because you can write them and then you finish a song, you finish the draft lyrics, and for some reason it doesn't live. Other times, other ones live. So that's my process.
So in going through those snippets of songs that you have on your phone, is it the case that sometimes like you'll listen to things and think, no, that's not right, but it may be right later on? So it's not like you listen and think, okay, I'm going to delete that. That's no use. It's that it could potentially, they could all potentially be something.
No, trust me. There are some where it's delete.
Well, it's good to be ruthless with yourself.
Yeah, you kind of have to be. Yeah, I think, for me anyway.
So just what you were describing then about, I love that idea of the guitar as like your friend that you have with you and that you're playing it as you're watching TV or whatever it is. It's almost like just the doing of it. It's like this unconscious or subconscious playing of it frees up a channel for something to come through, and you know to trust that process.
Yeah, look, it's worked. Yeah, that's right. And I think worked the last time. It worked. It's working now. The writing process has changed a little bit this time around. You're forever evolving. And my belief as a songwriter is that as I get older, you start to, for me, it's all about the really little things and just the little turns and the phrasing. And so I've become a lot more, I'm honing in more on literally lines, and more so than the last record, but it's more or less the same process. Yeah.
So when did this relationship with the guitar start? How old were you?
About 16. I was had a bit of a misspent youth, Sophie, and always hanging around with older guys. And there was a bunch of them that played guitar, and they literally just taught me the D chord or the G chord or the C chord and a few songs, ground control to major tom. And once I worked out that I could play those songs, I had this sort of idea that Bowie and Bob Dylan and all my favourite artists, particularly as a kid, I thought they were all musical geniuses, and that involved a lot of study. I'm not sure what I thought, but I just didn't think it was open to me. And then when I started playing those basic chords, my whole world opened up. So that was how it started.
Yeah, I suppose it can be prohibitive to creativity to have those idols in mind and think, yeah, that's genius, and that's nothing that I can ever do. And I sometimes think it'll stop people forever. They won't actually try because they just think, I can't actually reach that.
I wasn't I don't have regrets in life, but if I have a time again, I would have taken it a lot more seriously a lot earlier.
Okay.
But
so there were no, sorry, go on.
No, it's fine. That's it.
I was just going to say, so there were no childhood instruments piano lessons, nothing like that?
A little bit of piano. Mum got me into piano because she thought maybe that would help. It'd be an educational thing for me. Played a bit of piano. Was always into music. Right. Always into music. So, my love of music's always been there. Probably more so, the most out of anyone in my family by a long way.
Right.
So I was always quite musical, but never took to an instrument until I decided I wanted to do it.
And what about singing? When did that start?
Professionally, not till my 20s, my mid 20s. But yeah, about then really. I just, I was always a lot of fear growing up, all that, not fear, just, fright, not stage fright, but just, probably, I don't know, low self-esteem, whatever.
Peer fright, I think.
More or less, yeah. And I don't hide from any of that stuff. I think it's all part of the process. And then I started writing songs, and I was driven. I had to take the risk.
Right.
So, and then once you sort of get over certain fears, you keep moving on.
So what prompted you to start writing songs? Was it that you had a certain level of proficiency on the guitar and you thought, okay, I can do something with this now?
Yeah, it wasn't really a conscious decision. I can remember playing chords and playing my own compilations. And before I started writing songs, I always had a notebook,
Right.
and it was almost like I don't know, poetry or just scribble, teenager scribble kind of thing. And when I started playing those kind of compilations, that I'd come up with subconsciously almost, somehow the two married, the notebook and the guitar married.
Right.
And I started writing songs that way.
Right. So those early songs, did they become anything? Like, did you start playing them live, or did you just think, well, I'm just going to do this as an exercise and maybe they shouldn't see the light of day?
There were some songs from when I was young that I hadn't performed, but when I started performing, I wrote. Yeah, definitely. Not all that many, but there's some. And
Yeah,
one
right.
in particular was a song that actually opened a lot of doors for me with the guys from the Kelly Gang. So, you know, they're never lost. There's some there that are pretty embarrassing too, I've got to tell you.
I think that's par for the course. Like you said, I really like the fact that you said you embrace, stage fright. That's part of the process. I think it's
Yeah,
definitely part of the creative process to have some
yeah,
dross, to
yeah,
clear the way for the good stuff.
yeah, definitely,
Yeah. So,
definitely.
you're from Sydney. So, when you started playing, I imagine you were playing around Sydney, and there were more venues then than there are now. So,
Much more.
which
Yeah.
venues did you start off playing in?
Oh, places like the Hopeton,
Oh,
played the Basement in the old days.
yeah.
Cat and Fiddle Hotel in Balmain, the Exchange in Balmain. There were places on Oxford Street like Club Fabulosa. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Not
They were
Club Fabuloso, but I remember the Cat and Fiddle when that had music. In fact, I used to go and see music there.
yeah, yeah. The
Yeah.
Bridge Hotel.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just trying to think.
I think the bridge is still
The Bridge
got,
is still
like,
going.
yeah.
Yeah, the Bridge is still going. But a lot of the others, the Hopeton isn't.
No.
The Basement certainly isn't.
Mhm.
So yeah, a lot of those venues are not around anymore. But there are venues in Sydney like Gasoline Pony that are very supportive,
Mhm.
places like that. So yeah.
Yeah, there are little pockets, just sadly, yes, not as many as there were. So you mentioned the Kelly Gang. So my impression is that you started off solo, and then obviously you ended up in a band or in a gang, rather. So how did that come
Yeah.
to be?
Well, that song I was telling you about, Rick Grossman, who, do you know Rick? He's the bass player from the Hoodoo Gurus, and he was at the time playing also in the Divinals when they were still playing. He's a good friend of mine, and he wanted to start a band. He had some songs. He's not a singer, and he'd heard this one of those songs that actually made it onto the Kelly Gang record, a song called Wired Again,
Mhm.
and he loved it, and he loved the singing on that, and we got together, and I wrote most of the songs to that record. But the thing that Rick did, I went from performing as a solo, duo, trio to all of a sudden working with Rick. And it was just at the time when Peter Garrett had left Midnight Oil to go into politics.
Oh,
And he said to me, I know some guys that could play this stuff. These songs are great. And next thing you know, I'm in rehearsals with Rob Hurst and Martin Rotzi, and it was pretty daunting, let me tell you, and very loud. I wasn't used to, the AC30 Voxes. You know what I mean? Like, it was loud, and I was singing, and to this day, I'm really grateful for Rick to Rick, because he really said, "You're doing it. It's happening. It's good. Just keep going." Because I was a
yeah.
little bit overwhelmed to start with, I must admit, with those
Well,
guys.
and also, as you said, the loudness, because if you're not used to singing in front of that much power, your
Oh
voice
yeah,
does have to adjust for it.
totally. Like, it was, it's a whole new experience, and it was just that. And those guys, are great guys. I mean, Rob was very generous. They were all great. They're great men, great players, phenomenal players, and it was a real experience.
So did you find that your singing voice changed permanently after that experience? Were there things that you learnt about what it could do because you were singing in front of that loud band?
One lesson I've learned is, just because the band's loud doesn't mean you need to sing louder.
Right.
Use the PA, otherwise you're going to blow out. And for me, your pitch will, remain. It's trying to find that place where you're not overdoing it.
Yeah.
But no, I don't think so. I don't think that it changed much. I mean, we sang in some different keys, but more or less the same.
Yeah. So you then returned to solo artistry after the Kelly Gang, and the genre in which you were playing, I saw referred to as Darlinghurst Country, which I thought
Yeah,
was quite nice.
yeah.
Did you ever call it that, or did someone else call it that?
Oh, look, I'd love to say I came up with it myself. I don't think I did, to be honest, but it was just a term I think that was being spread around a bit in the old days.
Right.
It's more or less alternative folk rock, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I did another record after that with Martin Rotzi. He and I produced a record you might have seen in the catalogue. That's the Sea. So, and that was probably alternative folk rock, I guess,
Hmm.
more or
And I
less.
should say for those, because I'm saying Darlinghurst Country, like everyone knows where Darlinghurst is. It's inner city Sydney. It's right on the fringe of the CBD. So
Yeah, yeah. It's too
uh,
cool for school, you
it's
know.
yeah. These days, yes. Look, in the 1920s, it was a total den of iniquity, but not that I
That's
was
right.
around then. Now, you
Yeah.
recorded songs of Hemingway in Nashville, and I've just had my first visit to Nashville, so I can totally understand why you would want to go there. But why did you decide to record there?
Well, there's a record, 4 records ago, Our Waverley Star. Um, so am I allowed to answer? It's going to take a little.
I'm
Stop me if
very,
I'm boring you.
no,
Um,
nothing's been boring so far, so I can't. I
Good, good.
don't expect that it
Our
will.
Waverley Star is about 4 records ago. I'd recorded that in Australia with my usual band, and it had been the normal process. 2 days here, he's not available. 4 days here, yeah, and it took a long time. Different studio for this, and
Yeah.
so it was pieced together probably like all my records up to that point, to a certain degree. And I have a friend who's does a lot of. He's in the pop world with Royal Otis, and he's their manager and the label owner.
Hmm.
And Genesis, he's a more top end, but he's a good mate of mine. And we were talking about the record, and I was saying how I was getting prepared to mix it, and I played him some of it. And he spends a lot of time in LA, and he said to me, and America, and he said, "Why don't you take it to Nashville?" And I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, take it there. You know, you'll get it done. It's for an experience." And and he's a real nurturer. He's obviously is because he's a manager, but he's a mate of mine. He's my age, and who do you like? And I'd been listening to a lot of Paddy Griffin and the Band of Joy. Do you know that record by Robert Plant?
I don't,
Phenomenal.
but I'm a fan of Paddy Griffin, so
Yeah, well, Paddy Griffin's record American Kid, which is, I think, one of the great Americana records. Paddy, I love that record, and I loved the Band of Joy. And I was looking at the credits in that, and this name kept coming up, a guy called Mike Poole. So I just did what I always do, and I emailed him and said, "Look, I don't know." You know, he had a website, and he had a list of all his clients and what he did. And I said, "I need somebody to mix my record." And I sent him some. He emailed me back 2 weeks later, said, "Can I hear it?" I sent him some of the Pro Tools stems, and then he said, "Love to mix it. How do you want to do this?" And then I spoke to my friend Andrew, the manager, and he said, "This is your opportunity. Don't send him. Get on an airplane and go over there."
right.
So that's what I did, and I mixed it with him, and we did some overdubs and everything, and that was very interesting. It was it was a great experience with him. He was a professional, bit lonely because I didn't know anybody there.
All right.
So I'd had the Nashville experience, and then I was ready to do my next record. And bear with me, there's a guy, Travis New, who's a great guitar player. Done a lot of live work with me. He's currently playing with Andrew Farris,
Right.
touring, and he is Australian. He married an American and had lived in Nashville. And I said, "Oh, I'm trying to get this record together." And the idea of 5 days here, I've got a day job like most musicians. So I had to think about how to do it. And he said, "Take it to my friend Justin Weaver." And I said, "Tell me about Justin." He said, "Don't worry, just call him. You'll love him." So I did that. And Justin at the time was touring with the Dixie Chicks, or the Chicks as they're known. He's still playing with Wynonna Judd, and he's a Nashville session guy.
Right.
And, you know, younger than me, but really, like those guys over there, they've been playing 6 instruments since they were sort of 6 years old. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I met him, and we had the same philosophy. And that was how that started. So I went and did it there. But the beauty of going to Nashville for me is I've got a team over there that I work with now. I'm just about to go into another record in February, March with them. Yeah, I like to cheat and call them my American band, but you go there for 2 weeks and it's done. You leave and it's half mixed. So there's no 5 days here, 5 days there. So it's turned out to be a lot more convenient, and it's really not that much more expensive if it is at all. So
Right.
that's been that's the Nashville story. But yeah, it's a cool place.
It's a cool place. And I have heard this before about the convenience of it, because of course, Australia also, if you're going to someone's studio on the Central Coast, for example, and then you're in Sydney, and then maybe you've got a guitarist who's living in northern New South Wales or whatever it is. Yes, getting everyone together in the one place for the amount of time you need is just logistically hard.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, it's been a wonderful experience.
Yeah. And also now, I guess, since you have those relationships, you can just step back into the same stream, when you go back over there.
That's it. And they're hardworking. I mean, most musicians here are too, of course, but it's different. It's a different musical culture in America because, and that's not in no way putting down my home country, because I've recorded great stuff here too. But America's made up of all those small communities. It's not New York and LA like we see on TV. It's like hundreds of these rich cultures. And music for them, well, certainly for some of my friends over there, was a lot different to the type of what music meant to my community growing up.
Yeah. And I also think, there is no place in Australia like Nashville that's set up to do that record half mix in 2 weeks thing. I mean, there were certain parts of Sydney a long time ago where there are quite a few studios around. There are some of them remaining, but most of that's gone. So there's no hub there for everyone anymore. So yeah, I totally understand. But you did have an instruction for your producer, which was no electric instruments, I believe.
For this record, yeah.
Record, yeah.
No.
So what is that decision based on?
Well, I mean, that when I was telling you before about learning guitar, I remember I just wanted to go back to what was it that you loved? What was it that really got you going? And I think it was literally that kid in the bedroom playing the C and the E minor and the right hand finally kind of sort of right hand and the left hand working together and thinking, I've got it, and it was that passion to think, wow, I love this. And so I wanted to find that kid again. And that acoustic thing, and I love acoustic music, and I still always listen to a lot of acoustic music, but I have been listening to a lot of that T-Bone Burnett stuff and the Johnny Cash songbook, and I mean all sorts of stuff. And I love that, and I think there's a real power to acoustic music that's not talked about a lot. If you hear, I think on the record we're talking about today, that the mandolin is just such a tiny little thing, and it's got this bizarre kind of punch and urgency. And what you don't get from an amplifier, the mandolin just gives you something else, just as powerful, I think.
Yeah. Well, and it's I made a note that there are some really muscular tracks on this album, like Mother of All Storms, and the mandolin features on that. So yes, you certainly don't miss the electric instruments because there are those layers and that power. But there are also songs that are really elegantly haunting, like Tofino, I think. So in the flow of putting those tracks together for the album, did you have an order already in mind, or was it after you'd recorded them that you just thought, this is how they should flow together?
Always after, like so many times I've gone to record thinking that song and that song, thank God I've got them, because I'm not sure about the other ones, and then the other, like the one that was just an afterthought, sort of ends up first. So you can never really tell. I mean, some songs you kind of come up the way you're expecting them to. Mother of All Storms is a good example. I always thought that'd be good. I love that one on the record, but more or less you can't tell. I can't. So sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, do you have a favorite track on the album?
Oh, look, if I can be bold and say I'm really proud of Tofino, I think that's a good story, and I like it lyrically. I'm pretty fussy with lyrics, so I think I'm pretty proud of that lyrically. That and the Mother of All Storms. If I had to pick two, yeah, probably those two.
Yeah. So with your lyrics, because you said you're fussy about them, do you tend to refine them in the studio, therefore? As you're recording and making that song, are there changes that come to you?
No, not really. Like I make a point, particularly now, when I go there, my role as far as the structure of the song and the lyrics is finished. It's ready.
Right.
So, like the songs go through different stages, and the last stage is probably around the month before I'm about to go and record, where I'll really start adding and detracting what I do and don't want, and then finalising lines. It's pretty rare that I'm coming up with lyrics or changing lyrics at the point of recording it.
So now you mentioned that you're going back to record new songs in February, March next year. So that sounds like you'll keep yourself on your album a year pace.
Well, I wish I could. That record that we're talking about, Songs for Hemingway, was recorded last year.
Right.
And it took a while to mix. So that's my directive this year. I want to get the mixing done a bit quicker. But then there's overdubs with backing vocalists. It's not, sometimes you've just got to be patient. But, every 18 months. How about that?
Look, I think that's a cracking pace
Yeah.
for anyone.
Yeah, yeah.
So are those songs that you're planning to record early next year, are they all done?
Sorry, say that again.
Songs that you're planning to record in February, March next year, are they all written now?
I'm writing them up now. So 5 o'clock in the morning I get up, and nobody's around, and I write. So yeah, it's going to be a little bit different, this record too. So
interesting. So I will ask you about the 5 o'clock in the morning, because some people swear by the early morning start for creative practice. Has that always been your practice?
Well, yeah, now that I try to be disciplined, because you sit there and sometimes you must hear it all the time. Sometimes you just think, what am I doing? And one day something might sound fantastic, and then other times you think, this is crap, and you've just got to keep believing in that original sort of the thing that you thought was good. You've got to trust that first feeling, Otherwise you give it. Otherwise I give a lot of stuff up. But yeah, you've got to hang with it. And some days it's great. Things come quickly. You'd hear it all the time,
Well, I do tend to think that thinking something's crap is a good sign, because if you're at the point where you're like, everything I do is genius, like this is all amazing.
No, I'm not like that. No.
But then I think, ultimately your work wouldn't be great, because you wouldn't be able to edit yourself the way that I think when you've got that instinct to think, no, I don't know what I'm doing, then you are more likely to edit yourself and get to a result that you're happy with down the track.
Yeah, I think so. I think you've got to be your own. You've got to be pretty critical of yourself when it's a balance. You can't overdo it, but also you've got to be realistic.
So you mentioned you were listening to T-Bone Burnett and Johnny Cash songbook around the time you were planning Songs for Hemingway. What music are you listening to at the moment?
Kendrick, believe it or not, Kendrick Lamar. I think he's a really great poet. I love his turn of phrase and his melodies. Creedence Clearwater Revival's getting a good run. A band called Low, do you know them? The Great Destroyer, that's a great record. Delta Cream by who's the huge artist with the that had the Black Keys, stuff like that at the moment, yeah. And all my favourite playlists, like I go back to my childhood, and some of it's pretty The Doobie Brothers, I love the Doobie Brothers. So sometimes they'll come into my playlist and think, wow, they're a great band,
Well, because I think you're about to say some of it's quite daggy, but they're classics for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm all about the song. If it's a good song, I'm not interested in what's cool and what's not. If it's a good song and sounds good, I'm happy.
Yeah. Well, you have many good songs on Songs for Hemingway, and I do encourage everyone to go and have a close listen and repeated listen to it. Not that it's I think it's immediately listenable. Actually, it's one of those albums that you could put it on, just go, oh yeah, this is great, and I'm really enjoying this. But then, as there's repeated listening, the layers reveal themselves. So I hope everyone listens to it closely. Jack, I will leave it there. I've had you talking for a while, but thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Sophie. And can I say jacknolanmusic.com, same as the socials, and same as all the other platforms. Thank you. And thank you for having me, and thank you for your support.
Very happy to support you, and I will put your URL and tag the socials so people can find it there too. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks again, Sophie.